Yep, that's right. It's me, back on my bullshit. This time it should be about enemies, which is in the same vein as villains, though is different. What I meant by villains was like overarching main bad guy. This is just your typical obstacles in stories. I'm recording this one at night, still very nauseous from earlier. There will be Mechanicus video up after this, but I recorded the Mechanicus video earlier after I finished eating, and I have been nauseous ever since. I already took my fucking, like, strong antacid medication, and I can feel acid damage in my throat. Which makes you wonder exactly how good these hour-long rambles are for my health. Especially because I can feel it crawling up. Ugh. So this one might be a bit quicker, because I hate this feeling, because I feel like trash, and because there is acid eating my esophagus. You know, normal human things. So I'll also be taking regular breaks to swallow the bile down and drink water. Gross, I know, but I felt like I should explain why this one's a bit different. Anyway, still confused, still sore throat, all the usual stuff. It's late at night, so we got that going for us, don't we? So, I should probably have a checklist in the description too. Check if you'd like, it should be there. Like I said, what I mean when I say enemy is your general foe in a story. Be it video game, story, TV show, movie, or tabletop role-playing game. Again, remember, I don't really buy things. I play games that I have already. Mechanicus is an exception, right? I seldom buy novels. I just read what I can find online. This is pretty big in the fanfic scene, right? For like a lot of fandoms, like video game fandoms especially, like TV anime fandoms, I guess, or like action show fandoms, maybe like Marvel movies and shit. Whatever. Uh, like fight scenes are a pretty common thing. You need to fight something for a fight scene, don't you? What do you fight? Foes. Now, ugh, this is gonna be a struggle. Now, what's the issue with just having your main character fight these foes, right? Well, power level. You gotta make your character struggle sometimes, no? Otherwise, it's an uninteresting story. And then you'll get accusations of Mary Sue's. Which getting accused of having a Mary Sue isn't a bad thing. Everybody's gonna get accused of that at some point eventually. So those stupid is your character Mary Sue tests you can find online, don't bother with those. They're practically useless. The equivalent of skincare clickbait for the writing circles. Oh, everything hurts right now. If everything is limited to my throat, that sounds weird, but you get the point. Uh, ugh, sorry. This one's gonna be a lot more disorganized as a result. Apologies. Ugh. Anyway, where was I? Yes, power level. So it's important to have a clear-cut established how strong your main character or characters or whatever are. Of all the things I'll talk about, game balance probably the least one because it's not like I make games. Right? I have very little grasp on game balance that is not tabletop game balance, and even then it could be argued. Sorry, I just need to take a sip of water right there. I know I mentioned it in a bunch of videos how like, oh, if I throw up, it'll end early. No, I think it might this time. Um, but I still continue. Anyway, um, it's important to have like a clear-ish through line on how powerful your main character is. This is especially important. Of- this is a real struggle. I'm so sorry to everyone who's listening. This is especially important when you are having a more action-oriented thing. Now, keep in mind that not every single enemy is like a slab of meat to punch to death. Sometimes an enemy could be in the verbal situation, like who has enough political clout to throw around, if it's like nobility on nobility or something. However, that's a lot more difficult to do and is a lot more limiting in terms of what genres it's really fit for. Like a crime drama or a political thriller is what they're more likely for, as opposed to um, what was I thinking? More fit to a crime drama or like a political thriller as opposed to your regular romp through just hack and slash fantasy, right? At that point, no one really, someone reading that sort of thing is less, uh, know your audience when you make your enemies. Some, sorry, I just got a message from my mobile provider. Weird. Uh, know your audience. Sometimes it can be really fun to just write that little hint of these characters are dangerous not for their martial prowess, but for the ideas they can have rally behind themselves. But once again, kill your darlings if it doesn't fit your story. Sometimes, well, frankly, it doesn't fit your story. Do not be afraid to shelve things for a later project or even just a later time within the same project. Sometimes forcing things is the worst thing. No, forcing things is the worst thing you can do unless what you're trying to do is like break and enter into a place. And in that case, I hope you're doing so legally. I don't condone crime, right? Um, but when we talk about enemies, we're usually talking about like someone to get into a physical confrontation with. So let's quickly go over some of those canned designs. What do I mean by that? I mean the typical archetypes you'll find. Not exactly a trope, it's an archetype. It is different. It actually is different. They mean different things. Um, an archetype is pretty much just a character trope, though. So, typical first easy archetype, wild animal. A wolf, right? We all know what wolves are. We all know what wolves are. How well we know what a wolf is it varies. They're bigger than you think, and hell, they're probably bigger than I think. Right? They are not just big dogs, they are big dogs. But a wolf is a typical enemy you'll see within fantasy. Or a dire wolf, if you have certain convictions. I don't know what those convictions are, it just sounded funny to say. But a wolf is a typical sort of fantasy creature, low-level fantasy creature you'll see within novels and video games and tabletop role-playing games especially. Although in TTRPGs, usually with the advent of pack tactics, they're more dangerous than they let on. The ability to roll twice and take the higher just is a crit fishing thing, right? It's great for crit fishing and you're just going to hit more likely on average. So be wary of putting too many wolves in your game, or at least in a combat, right? Don't make the mistake of like, oh, it's just wolves, so put in a few, right? With pack tactics, you're increasing the wolf's effectiveness by half, at least. Anyway, that's like a typical low-level enemy you'll see in a fantasy story. Typical, like, still low to maybe medium-level enemy you'll see is a bandit or some sort of criminal. Um, they're higher than a wolf because of their usage of tools and likely ranged weaponry, getting the jump on someone first, or even just mugging you. Then is like mid-level would be like an assassin because, well, that's pretty threatening. The stealth, crit rate, or what have you, sneak attack, whatever it is. And then high level is like a dragon or like an entire like army, things like that. My convictions float usually towards low fantasy than they do towards high fantasy. So what I said is probably for high fantasy regardless, but keep in mind that the stuff I usually like reading is low fantasy. So holy hell, someone who hasn't updated this thing in 2 years just became active. Well, I'll be damned. Anyway, I'm still active within fanfic communities, just probably not ones you'll find me in. I seldom comment though. If you find me, I mean, hey, you found me. Don't like say anything though. I kind of hate it when I'm in any piece of media, YouTube videos especially, and I see, oh, blank sent me here. I hate that because I like reading comments a lot. Not even just my own, it's just like, oh, comments. I can't wait to see what the masses have to say about X thing or, shit like that. So when I see, like, in songs on YouTube, I go to the comments and it's like, oh, X movie brought me here. Kind of inwardly cringe a little bit, or at least get a little bit frustrated at just that's the only thing I see now. How I would have loved to be here before movie used this song, just to see what it would have been like to read comments that are, talking about, I don't know, maybe the parts they liked, or maybe like inspiration they got from listening to it, or maybe song recommendations. If you liked this, I don't know. You get what I'm trying to say. I hope. Um, where was I? I was talking about archetypes, and I was talking about high fantasy and low fantasy, and then I immediately got distracted with something, as I am wont to do. So let's move on. For like other pieces of media, right? I mean other genres, so like cyberpunk, or no, I guess let's just go over like types, right? Humanoid, aberration, shit like that. Um, Obviously, D&D will have CR. D&D and other tabletop role-playing games, roughly, will usually have some sort of challenge rating or gauge on what kind of enemies are fit to what party level, etc., things like that. So keep that in mind. So whatever I say next is usually going to be around not tabletop. Oh wow, is that blood I'm tasting? It's not uncommon for me to taste blood, and I talked with friends, and apparently that is not common for the masses. But again, we don't know what the fuck is wrong with me. I'm melting my throat. Normal shit, normal shit. What was I saying? Anyway, so whatever I say next is probably not going to pertain to tabletop role-playing games. So, or if it is, it'll be a lot easier to ascertain danger level, especially when you can see visually like the representation of your players' stats. Now, humanoids are usually middle of the road to high in terms of threat level, given just the fact that they're humanoid and are capable of higher rationalization, higher brain functions, critical thinking, threat assessment, stuff like that. Person's not usually going to pick a fight they think they can't lose unless they're drunk or stupid, or just overconfident, which is a slow and insidious killer. Most animals are usually simpler, but that is not because they are stupid. Um, in one of my things, I really tried to stress, I don't know how well it came across, one of my things I really tried to stress that animals are not stupid. They have just a different kind of intelligence to us, right? Hello? Sorry, apologies. I accidentally knocked my headphone wire out. Um, I think it should be fixed now. Yep, I'm looking at my bar move up and down. Sorry about that. Animals are not stupid, right? Um, it's a it's like a common scene in a bunch of horror movies, or like just before like a big climactic fight in an action movie, where animals will go quiet as a huge threat starts looming, things like that. That's a pretty clear-cut sign of intelligence. They know when to be more quiet, be more stealthy because of some sort of inherent danger within the area. You see what I'm getting at, right? Like the only thing that really sets them apart, in my opinion, why animals are less threatening than some other ones is lack of tools. Or well, that's pretty much the long and short of it. Well, and a few other things too, but primarily it's like the lack of tools. If your main character has a sword, they have a huge up huge step up on some sort of wild animal. Obviously, like a bear, right, is pretty out of the question for anybody unarmed. If not explicitly everybody, I mean, unless your character does magic, of course, because magic is pretty much whatever you need it to be for plot reasons. I mean, obviously, like, I mean, I'm presuming there's like a magic system and stuff like that, rules and whatnot, but, uh, like, someone who doesn't have stuff like that, I mean, what was I saying? Right. But pretty much magic is just whatever the plot needs it to be. Not as an insult, right? I don't mean that as an insult, but that's kind of how magic works in most stories. Anyway, obviously, like a bear or something is a pretty huge threat to your main characters, especially if they're alone. But, you know, with a weapon, say like a spear with some sort of brace on the head to not allow the bear to slump down the spear and still snag the guy holding it, it's I guess like a fair fight, right? Or at least like you have a significant edge on that bear just because of range. Humans' ability to outrange their foes is paramount to to the reason why animals are pretty low in my opinion on threat level. And then unless it's an aquatic animal because you're in the ocean, at a stark disadvantage from whatever's hunting you, if you get what I'm saying. Uh, or if it's flying, but if it's flying, it's roughly going to be less dangerous to you because it's probably smaller, unless obviously you know dragon, but dragons are different as a whole. Speaking of dragons, in a way, dragons usually a pretty high danger thing. I'm just gonna go over a few more of these things, but I'm sure you're tired of hearing me talk about this specifically. Dragons are usually a pretty high threat level sort of thing. Demons are depend heavily on the story and usually the kind of demon. In plenty of stories, like imps are little idiot trash fodder creatures, whereas like archdevils and shit, something to fear proper. So it depends on the story you're telling, but it can go either way. I seldom see them go down the middle, however. A soldier is definitely more threatening than a person and is roughly going to be in the spot of middle of the road pack, more so than a human, and for the rest you'll probably use like you'll either use context clues or you'll just kind of inherently know. What I mean by context clues is like for a slime. Sometimes slimes are low-level fodder mobs, Terraria, most JRPGs, things like that. Or they can be like D&D with a gelatinous cube, or it can be like Darkest Dungeon with its slimes. I love Darkest Dungeon and its slimes. Shout out to Bear Taffy's the worst Darkest Dungeon run ever. It's pretty famous. Watch it if you haven't. It's hilarious. Even if you don't know anything about Darkest Dungeon, please watch it. It's hilarious. No offense, Bear Taffy. Anyway, so fucking hangnail pissing me off. Ow, fuck. That's what I get, don't I? So like that's, the few typical, like, what kind of enemy do I have? This is it rough guide from me, and boy was it rough and likely boring for you. So let's move on. Hand designs. Now, this is more like a quick, I need instant conflict. Time to bust open old reliable, and you pull out an encounter. Encounter tables, or tabletop role-playing games, are a pretty famous thing. Random encounters, right? Personally, I'm not keen on random encounters, so I think some of my players are. So like, biggest thing of all, if you're gonna use random encounters in tabletop, talk to your players first. Ask them if they think they'd like random encounters. Always be open to moving on the fly. It doesn't have to be, is this the campaign where we do random encounters? It can be this session. Do you guys think you would like a random encounter, or do you think you would like to move on with the main plot? You can go back on your word. The flesh is fluid. It can be reshaped, remade. You know what I'm going getting at. I would hope. Anyway, I chipped a nail typing, so I'm a little bit distracted clipping those, as well as fighting off my nausea. It's also dark in my room, so I have to work by phone flashlight. Ew. Sorry, anyway. So keep in mind, right, your players are very important, more so than you as the DM. Not saying the DM is unimportant. Again, I DM. I get how hard this shit can be. But what I mean is, you are here to make a story for your players, not make a story for yourself, and your players just happen to play a character. The story is theirs as much as it is yours, as much as it is yours. Make sure they're having fun as well, please. Also, show up for your fucking sessions, guys. No, me better fucking. Nah, this guy. Perish the thought. Anyway, just adjusted in my seat. So, hand encounters, right? It goes beyond just for tabletop games. If you don't know what next fight should happen for your story, don't be afraid to take a look at a random encounter table. Um, Especially because most tabletop people will go ahead and sort them by where location they're in. People have entire tables for desert random encounters, temperate random encounters, forest, swamp, etc. You can find one to fit your story. Sometimes they'll even have them organized by CR, so you can roughly get a good fight for how strong you wager your characters are. Maybe you can even look at the stats for the creatures that they have there as some inspiration for what will happen in your story. Right? You see what I'm trying to say here is like, use resources in creative ways, even if it's not the source you're going for. You can use random encounter tables even if you're writing a story or making a short film or something. I've done it before. I didn't know what to do. I looked up desert random encounter. Bam. You don't have to roll either, right? Even as the DM, if you're doing it for the game, you don't have to roll. You can read through the table, maybe like an hour before session, and go, most of these look kind of not super great. This one, however, looks pretty cool. I think I'll do this one. You can either fake it to your player that you're rolling or something, but you don't need to be beholden to the dice if it doesn't give you something you think you can work with, or it doesn't give you something you think is good, or fits, or whatever have you. This is especially true for the writing a story aspect, as opposed to the tabletop aspect. Probably more so than tabletop aspect, because if you're playing tabletop, you probably want to roll the dice, because, hey, I spent a bunch of money on these dice, might as well get some fucking use out of them. Hey, we've all been there, not judging. Well, not me, though. I only have the one set, and it's a really nice set. They have little turtles in them. Anyway, they're very cute. Even the D4 has a little turtle in it. Clear resin. It was cheap too, which is a boon for me because I don't like spending money. I'm not like majorly broke or nothing. It's just like I prefer to be frugal. Uh, but like what benefit does having a canned little fight add to your story? Because you don't always need to fight. Not every session needs to have combat. Not every chapter needs to have a fight. Not every update you put for your fanfic needs a fight in it. Lord knows half of mine don't. Likely more than half of mine don't. Um, and that's fine, right? So use the canned fight scene with restraint, please, because otherwise it's just boring action slop, as lame as it was to say that phrase. So, what are some other, like, canned fight scenes? Stopping a mugging, right? Encountering animals while you're traveling. A carjacking. Dragon encounter. Mermaids if you're at sea. It's usually a big one. It's always mermaids. It's always fucking mermaids. Kind of sick of sirens myself, but that's just because it's the only ocean creature we've had for the past dozens of years. At least it's the way it fucking feels. Do a Karnk. Karnk. The water monster from Amnesia. Do one of those. That's a bit more interesting, no? Anyway. Sorry, just had to swallow once again. So, I mentioned, why do you need to have restraint for your... Sorry, I'm just writing it down because it wasn't on the notes. You fight. When should you show restraint? Why should you show restraint for adding a fight scene to your story? Maybe thinking to yourself, cheese underscore stick one. Wouldn't it be more interesting to add fight scenes to my stories because it gives my pace a little jump. It gives my readers something to like get invested in. Well, first of all, writing fight scenes is a bit harder than it is writing other scenes, and I recognize this as someone who writes fight scenes. I'm like, oh, this is a bit tricky. Sometimes I wish I was doing something else. Or sometimes I wish I didn't elect to do a fandom that has a lot of combat in it, because now I have to make the combats unique and distinct from one another. Same with uh, D&D, right? You want to have your fight scenes feel distinct from one another, feel unique, like they had a purpose within them. Where did I say it like that? Or at least that's how I tend to feel myself. Sorry, I took another swallow. Um, do you want, usually, want your fights to feel like they've had some sort of purpose to them? I do, at the very least. I like it when my fights are distinct, or at least have a unique set piece that differentiates one from another, right? Sometimes a fun set piece is all you need. Well and truly. Sorry, something. Oh, my fucking face. Might have been my hair. Cons of long hair irritating your very sensitive face that goes seldom touched because you are very lonely. How does how much of these videos, right, is just me like dropping some shit I probably shouldn't have? I know a good chunk of most of these videos is me complaining about my acid burned throat. I reiterate, my stomach acid is eating at my throat. I have really bad acid reflux. I cannot eat a meal without feeling like I must vomit. I get constant nausea. Is it coming through well enough? Is it going at you well enough that I got an endo, endoscopy to ensure that there was no parasites or celiac disease or something with my body? Is it coming through well enough that there is something wrong with me? Yes, of course there fucking is. Look at the shit I post. Look at the shit I write. Less of the shit I write. Oh, I guess because I wrote it for spite. That's probably something wrong with me. I derailed myself. And I forgot what I was talking about. Um, I was talking about right, I like having my set fights feel unique and distinct from one another. Your reader probably would also love it if your fights feel unique and distinct from one another. They probably wouldn't like it if every chapter just suddenly devolved into a fight for no reason, right? They probably wouldn't like it if every episode of your TV show was just a fight for no reason. Sometimes it's okay to let the pace breathe, right? Sometimes it's okay to just let a scene simmer for a little bit before turning up the heat. It's an important step in cooking for a lot of meals. Why not for your story? And more importantly, sometimes you just don't have a good idea. Really, sometimes there just is no good idea. So take a break, relax a spell. Here's something I like doing when taking a break from my main writing piece. I write something that's in universe but from somewhere else. Sometimes it's a bestiary entry, sometimes it's a diary entry from a character's perspective, sometimes it's just like an in-universe poem or something. Take a break, but still be thinking about it. Just not your main piece. Otherwise, you'll get burnt out and tired and shit like that. Nobody wants burnout. Authors really don't like burnout. Writers really don't like burnout. I know I hate it when it happens to me. Speaking of, it's happened to me with my fanfic right about now, so I'm taking a short break from it and working on a different project. It's healthy. Um, so, again, you really don't always need to have a fight. Or, even better, you can have a fight almost start and then be circumvented by some sort of peace negotiation to still have a pace breaker, but in a unique way that shows multifaceted aspects of your characters, right? Sometimes characters wouldn't want to resort to violence. Even violent characters sometimes don't want to resort to violence. And you can play with that for your story. Give it a unique scene. That's always fun. Um, but if you are gonna make a fight, how do you make it stand out? In before comments saying just put a chandelier in the room. This is a joke referencing the critique of marshals are bad, where the because marshals in D&D 5e and 5.5 are indeed bad compared to casters. In before someone says just have them swing on a chandelier to add pace to add something fun to combaters, have them be more creative with their turns or describe their swings a little bit differently. This is not the actual problem. If we just went back to some 3.5 and maybe even 4th edition rules. Ooh, praising 4th edition, so edgy. No, 4th edition was actually very well balanced. The issue was it was a bit too well balanced. Fun fact, 4E was supposed to be released alongside a digital tool that would make it a bit more like a video game, but the digital tool was never released, and so we just had this very clunky sort of wants to be a CRPG without being a CRPG system. Um, 5E is likely better, but 4E absolutely had some points where, such as giving like the marshals unique abilities to do beyond just I swing or I action surge or second wind or something. Anyway, how do you actually make fights stand out? Usually by putting your opponents on equal footing with with your main party, adding a few blocks and parries from the foe to make them last a bit longer in the fight, to make them more cunning perhaps, to make them be skilled, it can do a lot for a fight scene. Um, Keep in mind, I'm not a big proponent of sword-on-sword combat. I'm a huge proponent of saying, yes, you can make ranged fights interesting, actually, but there's the sword lock scene for a reason, where your main characters lock swords and dramatically rant and rave at one another within sword fighting distance, and then every HEMA enthusiast and armchair historian, or someone who has even thought about how a fight works, will sit there and tell you that's not what would happen. Um, Nobody locks blades like this. I made an X with my arms. Nobody locks blades like this. They would absolutely be trying to maneuver to break past someone's guard or just shove through. Having them do things such as that, where they block and parry and deflect, to make them seem on a higher level is a good scene. Another way to make fight scenes stand out. Is this gonna be about fight scenes? No, it probably won't be. Um, to make the enemy stand out, you make a fight scene stand out. It's actually a good point. I'll go on how to make the enemy stand out afterwards. To make a fight scene stand out, um, one thing could be giving your party or main character a primary objective that is not just beat them into submission. If they must defend a building, the real threat is not letting anybody run by you. If they sparked a fire in the building, the issue is now running to the fire extinguisher to put it out, or bucket of water, or fire safety blanket, or whatever. You know? Uh, Where's my water? Hold on, where's my water? My throat. Give me a sec. It's all better. Even even having them fight at night is a great change of pace. So long as you recognize that fighting at night poses a very incredibly unique challenge of I can't fucking see. Oh god, I can't fucking see. Or haha, now I can see by using a torch or a flashlight or a lantern. However, now I can be seen. Of course, if you're doing something with night vision, this is like bypasses usually, but that's the point I'm trying to make is like play with darkness a lot more often, play with doors a lot more often, play with walls a lot more often, play with height and elevation, play with wind and rain, play with fire and ice. throw in other effects into your fight beyond just two opponents meet in a grassy knoll. Shout out to the grassy knoll of JFK. So how do you make enemies stand out? By deviating, of course. That's how you make anything stand out. How do I make a wolf stand out? Make it eldritch in nature. How do I make a bandit stand out? Make it eldritch in nature. How do I make a demon stand out? Make it eldritch in nature. Now, am I advocating you put eyes bulging out of their sockets, pustule laden uh, divots carved into your opponents, insignias and sigils hewn into bone, dozens of writhing tendrils both in and out of the skin, oozing with blood and whispering some sort of what you can swear are every language all into one. Well, yeah, I am advocating for that because that is cool. Um, but it's also kind of a joke, but also it's kind of fun. Anyway, I say a wolf fight, and you might roll your eyes or just kind of be uninterested. I say what sounds like the painful cry of a wolf starts to gurgle and then start to sound almost as if the wolf is whispering its scream and then saying its scream. And then now that it's just sounding like it's panting from an open-mouthed howl, and as it gets closer, you can see that on its spine are three eyes arrayed in a triangle, each one yellowed, tinged whites, like it was affected with jaundice. Patches of hair have started to fall out, overgrown nails poking from beneath the claw. The back hind legs are too thin, the front legs are too thick. The maw splits into two, like a like the flaps of a box. And as it rears up, it stands on its hind legs, not buckling an inch, makes a yip, and starts digging beneath the dirt, and you can see the trail approaching you. That is a lot more interesting than even just um, passing through the forest. You're given pause as you hear some scratching upon bark. You turn your head and see a wolf doing its best to make its body sleek and narrow as possible, taking nervous steps forward. It's clearly you can see the clear hunger in its eyes and the glint of its whites of its eyes. As it notices you have seen it, it hunches forward. Its ears go flat against its skull, bares its teeth, and growls. Right. One of those is more memorable than the other, though even still, what I just said is more memorable than just you hear the cries all around you as wolves start to peek in from the thicket. Roll initiative or something along those lines. You see what I'm trying to say? Even presenting old in a new light can make all the difference. Um, Alongside, right, if your bandits have some sort of cohesion to them, say they all wear a bone mask painted white with blue accents, bam, that's a whole gang right there. Or say their gang, again, watch the bandits video by Desks and Dorks. They mentioned before the press gangs that would have you be roaming gangs of thugs that want people to vote in a specific way, usually through threats and coercion and voters fraud and things like that. That's a more unique design than your typical bandit who just wants to kill for money. Explaining what the enemy army looks like in full and maybe like what deviates from it and why is a unique thing you can do, or have them act differently, right? Like part of why the wolf thing I mentioned was so different is because you would have expected it. Oh, it's eldritch, but it'll slow charge at you. No, now it's digging underground. What do I do about this? Like how much is really different? Things like that, right? Combined arms tactics by your bandits may be implying that they're not just your typical banditry, or the dragon like would say lie in wait upon smoldering ruins, waiting for anybody to come in after seeing what could be signs of distress for a second meal or something like that. Usually we perceive dragons as these hit and run sort of things, so having a dragon stick around afterwards, like lying in the ashes, could be a lot more interesting and give credence to why your dragons are, say, like ashen colored or something. Maybe it's not natural. Maybe their typical color is a bronze hue, but they coat themselves in the ashes for that exact reason. Just do your best to deviate from the standard form, but give a good reason why. Or give something unique. Or give them something cool. Like, not even, they don't need to look different. They could look the same as usual, these bandits, but if they have a ballista, suddenly that's a huge change. Right? Uh, and then, of course, handling rewards. This is a bit easier for your stories, because usually in stories we don't have roving bands of jackasses looting every corpse they come across. But for a tabletop game, just, there's standard loot tables and stuff like that, but it really is up to you what you give people. Just try to keep it in line. Also, don't have your animals drop gold. I don't do that because that's weird, but, I get why it is for video games. Let me look through. Oh, nausea coming back. Hold on, let me fight it off. Ugh. Give your enemies reasons to be against you. There we go. Reasoning. Give them a clear-cut reason why they're opposed to the enemy, or your main character. It could literally just be as simple as the villain told them to do it, or it could be because they perceive the main character to be against something they hold near and dear to their hearts, right? Say this is a place that venerates the snow, and in comes your main character who is an artificer of sorts and is working on some sort of radiator or a generator that produces a lot of heat. They could see that as a threat to their way of life. Now, of course, you're not going to gang up on the guy in the middle of the night and torch his house, likely, but throwing some insults here and there, kids throwing rocks and snow at someone, being barred from locations, being physically shoved out of town meetings, shit like that. Like that's a reason that I gave them. Sure, it's like fucking thinly veiled and kind of bullshit that I just put up on the spot, but you get the idea, right? You Fleshing out the reasons of your enemies is as important as your villains, even if they go hand in hand usually. Nobody wants to get jumped just because, and nobody wants to read about that either, because that's usually lame as fuck. Yep, this one's gonna be a lot shorter. I am really struggling with this nausea. Ugh. That, and I'm blanking on more things to say. Sorry it was shorter. Ugh, this is not fun. I'll see you later. I'm running out of ideas. Please in the comments let me know what you think I can talk about next. Or even just like a few things. I can just string things together at this point. I love doing this and want to keep doing this. Thank you for watching this far. Sorry it was shorter, like I said already. Uh, but please have your enemies be more unique. I really would appreciate that. Because I'm sick of canned fight scenes. If you're gonna put a canned fight scene out, throw some spice on that bitch. Alright, so yeah, thank you.